Resident Evil 4 is not only one of the best Resident Evil games, but perhaps one of the best remakes of all time. And not for the reasons that you might think. Releasing in 2023, 18 years after the initial release, the remake garnered extreme amounts of hype among casual and die-hard fans of the series. Needless to say, Capcom has been on a roll in the past few years, releasing hit after hit, including the Resident Evil 2 remake, RE3, Village, and of course, the highly anticipated Resident Evil 4. But for one reason or another, I never played a Resident Evil game prior to RE4. And after hearing the reviews of the game, I was so eager to try it out that I picked it up on release. And to my surprise, I was entirely captivated by how incredible this game looked, played, and even how good the story itself is, especially for a horror game. I should mention, since then I've also played Resident Evil 2, which I will be referencing on occasion throughout the video. But anyway, since it had been about 6 or so months since I last played, I decided to replay the game, to take an in-depth look, to decide if the praise for this game is warranted, if it really is one of the best remakes of all time, and also to uncover what made it so special to me upon my first playthrough, that I almost immediately became a massive fan of the series. Now I want to begin by discussing just a brief overview of the story, but I couldn't help myself from first touching on the insane graphical upgrades that are featured in this game. Upon the first moments you begin the campaign, you will notice not only are the cutscenes damn near movie quality, but the gameplay itself looks incredible. I love this because it allows you to get even more into the story and become easily immersed in the areas that you're exploring. I see some people complaining that the characters do look a bit more cartoony than the previous RE2 remake, and I completely understand that. But it really isn't to the point where it's so overbearing like some make it seem. These graphics look incredible. The story itself revolves around Leon Kennedy, arguably the most beloved character of the franchise, who is now traveling to Spain in search of the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, who's been kidnapped by a religious cult and held captive at a church, at least initially. Early on, Leon will be infected with the virus, as will Ashley, cultivating to an ending where he has to not only save himself, but Ashley from the virus as well. Right off the bat, you will notice that Leon feels more grown up and confident in this entry. He definitely looks a little bit older, and he feels like a completely new man as compared to Resident Evil 2. I actually think this is my favorite version of Leon. I haven't played Resident Evil 6 yet, but I've seen some footage. He looks cool there, but I think this is like the perfect Leon. We see him turn from being timid and sometimes downright scared to legit roundhouse kicking multiple enemies at once. These zombies are not the typical zombies you expect from a Resident Evil or any horror franchise for that matter. They look and behave more akin to how a normal human would, due to them not being infected by a virus quite like the previous entries. They're being controlled by creatures called Las Plagas. I'm really not sure how to pronounce it. These creatures, although seemingly mindless at first, are actually being mind controlled themselves by sinister Lord Sadler, who basically has the lead parasite for himself, allowing him to keep his own mind intact. These zombies will also mutate as you progress through the story. First, having a second form, I guess, with a sort of broken neck. You'll know what I mean when you see it. But then a bit later, they have this giant plaga, at least I think that's what it is, mutate from their head, meaning that we'll need more headshots to defeat them. Sometimes you will also be given the opportunity to beat them just by stabbing them when they're down before they can mutate. It's pretty freaking crazy, and honestly scared the crap out of me the first time this happened. This, in my mind, is an incredible change of pace from the previous entries. Trust me, I'll never get tired of killing your typical brain dead zombies like in the previous entries. It was just refreshing to see a spin on the zombie stereotype, where they can speak, do more human-like activities, and some of the more powerful ones are even able to communicate and have full-on conversations with you. But I do have to play devil's advocate here. To me at least, giving the zombies the ability to communicate, or even just say some words here and there, does take away a bit of the scare factor. Now trust me, there are still moments in this game where I yelled from being jump scared, but it just lacks a lot of the moments of genuine fear, like in 2, when Mr. X appears out of virtually nowhere and I become legitimately concerned about my cardiovascular health. Now aside from just the typical enemies, there will also be things to look out for, whether on the ground or in the air. Early in the game, you will notice that there are tripwired like explosives, usually on staircases or in some of the villagers' houses in the first and second chapters. There will also be a plethora of bear traps scattered across the entirety of the game. I have had my fair share of being caught in these. I'm just not looking at the ground all the time. I'm trying to watch out for zombies. And there goes 10% of my HP. Also, later in the game, there'll be this big ass boulder tumbling down some stairs in Ramon Salazar's castle. Definitely was not expecting this. And later on, there's an aerial turret in the later chapter 15. This is nuts and takes ages to destroy this thing. Anyway, they were clearly aiming for a more action-based game than a survival horror that the franchise was known for at the time. And because of this, the game goes for a much more linear feel this time around. It's not a hallway style game like Crash Bandicoot or something, and there are quite a few areas that are more open, but there's far less backtracking. Now, don't get me wrong, enemies will swarm you like never before. You just feel a bit more powerful in this entry, and that, in my opinion, is mostly due to having access to much more ammo in comparison to earlier titles. Now before you say anything, yes, I know ammo is still kind of hard to come by, and I've ran out of ammo a plethora of times, especially on harder levels and difficulties. But there is a much more simple solution here than the previous games. When you beat a zombie, they will almost always drop something, and oftentimes, that's ammo. So if you're running low on ammo, get a headshot in to stagger them, and then melee attack those Plaga Pansies to their doom. I love the animations for these, especially the suplex takedown when you're attacking from behind. Now, speaking on the topic of ammo, another beloved character is introduced here.
Over here, stranger.
The merchant's a character you'll come across multiple times in every chapter, sporting an East End London accent, or at least so I've been told. The shopkeep will offer you new weapons, the ability to upgrade your weapons that you previously purchased, like increasing power and ammo capacity, and various items for healing, recipes to create ammo, resources to combine with gunpowder to create more ammo, and a lot more options on top of that. At first, you will start off with just a handgun, but you can soon save to purchase more powerful handguns, a variety of shotguns, SMGs, magnums, and other special weapons like the rocket launcher. On your journey, you will come across many items, but your case will only be big enough to carry a certain amount of these. Here in the shop, you can upgrade your case to allow for more items to be collected that you might really need to progress in certain areas. But in order to purchase these, you'll need to save up on the currency of the game called pesetas, I think, but you'll find these from killing enemies and searching loot crates. If you are broke, however, like I was about 75% of the game or so, you can sell valuables you've collected to the merchant as well. And many of these will be found by collecting keys and using them on locked drawers and such. This will definitely come in handy, especially if you've been taking your time looting, and is much easier than getting a code like in previous games. Memorizing it and then finding the exact safe that code is good for. Oh, and also, you can start doing side quests for this guy, like killing rats and breaking medallions. It's pretty tedious stuff for the most part, but he will reward you with Spinel, which is used to purchase items and upgrades that you can't purchase from the shop otherwise. Initially, I did find these to be quite boring, but on my second playthrough and third, I managed to do just about all of them, and I thoroughly enjoyed the challenge in some cases. Also, occasionally, near the merchant, there will be shooting ranges, 5 to be exact. Although only 4 of these will add new courses, utilizing a variety of weapons that you may not have access to yet. Upon completion of one of these, depending on your ranking, you will be granted tokens, which can be attached to your briefcase to provide you with perks and buffs. I thoroughly enjoyed these, probably way more than I should have. I always challenge myself to go for the S rank, not because I had to or I necessarily needed these perks to progress, but because it was genuinely a great time and a nice change of pace from the other elements of the game. You also have the option to change outfits for Leon and Ashley, as well as purchase other bonuses in the bonus menu on the main menu screen, like concept art. Now I know the previous games had some options for your outfits, but this has a lot more variety, and I definitely loved experimenting with these. Moving on though, this game is, unlike others, broken up into chapters, 16 to be exact. These chapters will generally have an overarching goal or premise to them, although some goals like rescuing Ashley from the church will be expanded across multiple chapters in the early game. Now I'm not sure of the popular opinion on this, but I very much enjoyed the addition as it felt like a goal to be achieved. Let me explain. It felt awesome getting to that chapter end screen after struggling through an area or particular part of the game. I also very rarely, if ever, stopped playing before completion of a chapter, and when I felt it was time for a break, these were the perfect time to do so. In addition, it also gave me an idea, as a first time player, how far I was into my playthrough. Although there are 16 chapters, this game is divided into 3 separate areas, each having a major boss fight at the end of their concluding chapter. These being the village, where you fight Chief Mendez, the castle, where you fight Ramon Salazar, and the island, where you fight Sadler. The build to these is damn near perfection, especially in my opinion in the village, where from the very start, Mendez is poised to be an unstoppable menace, culminating in him chasing you in Mr. X fashion, and then having to ultimately take him on in a fiery showdown. These earlier chapters in the village will introduce you to some new characters, and also bring back some returning ones as well. And returning to RE4 from RE2 is everyone's favorite spy, Ada Wong. I can imagine for the people playing through the original game upon its release being super excited for this return, as she is one of the most beloved characters for many reasons. I do also love the part she plays here, although some aren't huge fans of the voice acting, but personally, I must say that the scene they meet up in is a bit underwhelming, to say the least. Leon doesn't even seem slightly surprised that she's alive. Like, you would have thought a bit more of a reaction would be granted for such a situation. But maybe I'm missing something. What do you guys think? Now for new characters, my favorite has to be Luis. He's a skilled, charismatic, and generally likable character that we get to see at least a little bit of build-up and development from. From the early areas of him and Leon held captive, to him aiding you along your missions. Although having his own agenda, it really feels like we made a friend in Luis along our travels. And the dialogue between these two is nothing short of top tier. Also, of course, it wouldn't be an RE4 review if I left out Ashley Graham, who, after saving from the church, will quote-unquote aid you in your missions. I say this because she does help you unlock certain doors and get through other areas that Leon can't, at least on his own, but goddamn, she can really get annoying. Like, very annoying at times. Not only is babysitting and protecting her going to get old really quick, but certain acts like the water room, where she has to raise the stairs for you to proceed, make for some of the toughest challenges that the game has to offer. And that's not something to say lightly. That being said, there are many difficult and some downright frustrating parts of the game, but the hardest, at least from my playthrough, was the cabin with Luis. Here we take a Call of Duty Nazi zombie approach and try to fend off the zombies by boarding up windows before they can make it inside. But let's be honest, guys, has anyone done this successfully? I'm not even sure that's possible. Not only that, but enemies will begin to only approach through the bottom floor. Then as you progress, they will begin climbing through the upper windows as well, creating all but sheer chaos. This part stressed me out like no other portion of the game did. I wasn't even sure that I could beat it at first. Not only will they swarm you in incredible numbers, but even given that the enemies do drop ammo still, and Luis is assisting you, throwing you ammo throughout, you still will have those moments where you run completely out of ammo and are forced to think of strategic ways to win this brutal battle. All I have to say is I'm very thankful you don't have to kill all of them, because god damn, this was hard. But again, I do love this because what is a good game without a good challenge? Now before I move on from the hardest parts of the game, you guys know I couldn't skip the puzzles that are notorious in Resident Evil games. Now there is a plethora of puzzles you will come across during your playthrough, but the majority will simply require you to be aware of your surroundings or just use your brain. At least there's not much backtracking or searching for codes required to complete these. Now I can't say this is the hardest puzzle, as I'm sure it varies from person to person, but the puzzle that I was stumped on the longest had to be the cave puzzles you encounter while searching for a way to unlock the church and rescue Ashley. The first time. If you played, you know. Although the encryptions needed are drawn on nearby pillars and such, I still couldn't figure this out for what felt like ages. Eventually, once I realized, I memorized the pattern with my girlfriend's help by thinking up encryptions such as flower, egg, and uterus. Worked like a charm.
Egg, hourglass, uterus.
Let's go.
Now I'm not going to do the easiest area or chapter because nothing really stood out as genuinely easy for me in this game. Feel free to voice your opinions on that though, because I'm genuinely curious. What do you guys think was the easiest chapter?
Give us a push, Sancho.
Before I get into my favorite part of the game's story, I felt the need to mention, at least briefly, one of my favorite aspects of the game in general. That being Leon's one-liners.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Leon sure appears to be a lot more grown up here when compared to his debut in RE2, and a hell of a lot more badass and confident. And along with our boy growing up, you already knew there would be no shortage of dad jokes.
Sorry. Must have slipped.
Now to go over all of these could literally be a video in its own, but just know these will have you rolling. He will say the most ridiculous things like nighty night nights after dismembering an entire onslaught of knights. Where's everybody going? Bingo? After you ring the bell in the village's dispense. And he'll always have some clever thing to say when being an enemy.
Adios, you son of a bitch.
Leon having a sense of humor like he does, given the situations he's put in, is admirable to say the least. And I really appreciate getting a good laugh in between some really dark moments. But dad jokes aside, my favorite part of this game has to be Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is nothing short of thrilling from start to finish. So much so that I consider this entire chapter my favorite part of the game. You'll begin it by reconvening with Luis, where you have to explode stuff. That's always fun. And take down a couple of giants, one even being armored, which I found to be really fun and one of my favorite boss fights in the entirety of the game. You basically just have to lower their HP and then get them to stand in the middle of the stage, where you can drop them into a pit of lava, trapdoor style, even ending off with a super exciting cutscene with Louis. This was really fun, and honestly, one of the most enjoyable boss fights in the game for me. And of course, whether it's Donkey Kong Country or Resident Evil, riding an old school minecart is always a great time. You get to shoot enemies who appear on other minecarts alongside you, while listening to some great dialogue between Leon and Louis. It's awesome. Honestly, if an amusement park ride ever got the rights to adapt Resident Evil, this is what they should take their inspiration from.
You like thrill rides?
The chapter also ends with a bonus addition to my list, the most emotional moment in the game. Shortly after the minecart section, you will battle Major Jack Krauser, a character who Leon has fought alongside previously, in a knife fight. An interesting twist on a game primarily focused on guns, where you get to put your parrying skills to the test. What's emotional, however, is the shocking death of Louis at the hands of the Major. For what it was, I really thought they gave him a good ending here. Made you feel for the character, and he also dies in a pretty badass way. Smoking a good old Marlboro Red, or whatever that was. All in all, I appreciate the way they fleshed out his character, and you do get to spend a lot of time with him, making the death that much more impactful for the player. I can also really appreciate the wide range of emotions that this game delivers. It can make you feel genuinely scared, and then also have you crying out in laughter the very next moment, while fleshing out some sad bits of the story along the way. And of course, deliver some serious feelings of thrill and excitement throughout the entirety of it. And nothing is quite as exciting as the final battle with Sadler. Resident Evil 4 has been building up to this since the moment you begin the campaign, and boy does it deliver. This fight takes a while to complete, regardless of how upgraded your weapons are. He will come at you from every angle and keep you on your toes. You need to make sure to evade when it's an option, and definitely conserve some ammo. Only shoot when you have a clear shot. Long story short, you have to shoot out all of his eyes, which I think he gets more of every phase. Not entirely sure, as I didn't count them or anything, but if you do pop every eye, he will kneel for a moment, allowing you to stab his Flaga. When the bugs come out in phase 2 or 3, make sure to kill off all of them. Most of the time, they'll drop ammo or herbs, and trust me, you'll need just about as much as you can get. After a few stabs, the good old Plaga, Ada will toss you a rocket launcher, similar to the end of Resident Evil 2 in the fight with Mr. X, ending the battle once and for all. Overall, this was a really fun fight, with the perfect amount of difficulty. I only died once, but right after this, I gave the final merchant all the money I had for tune-ups, resources, and everything else I can get my hands on. So, long story short, I wouldn't recommend going into this fight empty-handed. Although there will still be a few barrels and herbs and stuff during the final showdown. But what I really loved is they don't just end it here with a wrap-up cutscene of them escaping the island. You have to jet ski your way away from the island with Ashley, while the timer on the top of the screen is ticking down, giving you a sense of urgency. Now this is honestly pretty simple, and I'm not sure how many people actually struggled to get past this part. I just like that you're actually able to do this, as opposed to just having a cutscene that shows them riding off into the sunset or something. Upon completion, you're also given the option to replay the entire story in New Game Plus fashion, while keeping all the guns, ammo, and upgrades that you got from your previous playthrough. Pretty nice touch. I definitely utilized this a few times. But before we do wrap up, let's briefly discuss what made this game so great, why it made me a fan of the series, and even why it's so important for the future of the franchise and the future of game remakes in general. I've always been a fan of the survival horror games, growing up playing the House of the Dead series, so I knew I would enjoy this franchise. But Once I was formally introduced to the gameplay, the aesthetic of the game, and Leon's badass personality, as well as some other characters I came to appreciate, I was entirely hooked and started getting every Resident Evil game that I can get my hands on. Although extremely late into the franchise, I doubt I'm the only person who was introduced to the series this way. And I also feel like with this resurgence of Leon-based games, Resident Evil 9 is almost surely going to feature him in at least some fashion. Well, what do you guys think? Do you think RE9 will have Leon as the main character, side character? Not at all? And also, what was your first RE game? But anyway, in short, Resident Evil 4 Remake is a thrilling, action-packed game that will have you on the edge of your seat and on your toes throughout its entirety. There is rarely a dull moment here. From the locations you'll explore, the characters you will play as and encounter, and the infected, and the weapons you'll use to defeat them, everything is recreated masterfully and feels like the natural evolution of the entry on modern hardware. This, in my opinion, sets the standard for games of its era being remastered. They don't have to be perfect, but this is a great example of how to remake a game and correctly expand upon it without ruining the things that made it good in the first place. I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video, especially this far into it. So if you guys did enjoy it, please feel free to support me by subscribing, hitting that like button, and commenting below on what game you want to see next, what you thought of this review, and anything else you'd like to tell me. I try to respond to every comment. But yeah guys, appreciate you so much again, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.